Tonight at 6 p.m. Eastern over on Jaguar Gator 8, a new college football video drops. Also at 9 p.m. Eastern, join me live on Twitch where we'll talk about anything and everything in our weekly Q&A stream. Link to join below. And now, on with our feature presentation. So, did anything happen on TV last night that I should be aware of? Seemed like a pretty uneventful night. I mean, St. Peter's laid an egg, and their Cinderella story came to a disappointing end. Miami forgot how to score in the second half, and that game became ugly. And
oh, wow! Wow!
Oh yeah, the Oscars! I forgot the Oscars were on. Take your pick for the punchline here. I guess everybody really does hate Chris. The only thing Chris Rock has been in that was more painful than that was Grown Ups 2. Guess Will Smith wasn't kidding when he said he came here tonight to boom, shake the room. The jokes just write themselves. Anyway, I bring this up because something like this actually happened in the NFL off the field that you might not be aware of, where a coach, just completely out of nowhere, decided to slap one of his players. Yes, this is shameless piggybacking off of a trend, and no, I do not care. When you think of how a player gets cut, 99% of the time, it results in the coach meeting with the player, the coach announcing that the player is no longer on the team, the player handing everything over, and the two sides shaking hands and going on their merry way. Not in 1983 with the Baltimore Colts. Because when Colts head coach Frank Kush tried to cut defensive back Derrick Hatchett from the team, let's just say things got very violent, and Kush did what any coach would do in that situation when cutting a player. And that was, he slapped the guy. Really, really hard. This is the story behind one of the most violent roster cuts in NFL history. Before I talk about the actual incident in question, and before I get jiggy with it, we need some context to understand just who Derrick Hatchett was in the first place, and why he was cut to begin with. Our story begins in 1980, when in the first round of the NFL draft, the Baltimore Colts drafted a 5'11" cornerback out of Texas named Derrick Hatchett. During his final season with the Longhorns, Hatchett was a ball hawk, as he led the Southwest Conference with 6 interceptions, and finished inside the top 10 across the entire NCAA in that category as well. Hatchett became the first player in Texas history to ever lead the Southwest Conference in interceptions, and the Colts were hoping that by drafting him and by spending high capital on him, that he could take that college production and have it carry over into the NFL. That was especially true when you consider the fact that the Colts were not very good in 1979, finishing 23rd out of 28 teams in passing touchdowns allowed, and they did not have a single player on the team record 5 or more interceptions. As a side note, to learn more about that 1979 Colts team, click the card in the upper right corner. Unfortunately for Hatchett and the Colts, things didn't quite work out that way at first. In 1980, despite starting every game for the Colts as a rookie, he did not record a single interception, although even though he allowed a few touchdowns and made some rookie mistakes, he played well enough to keep his starting spot. In 1981, even though Hatchett recorded the first 2 interceptions of his career and started 13 out of a possible 16 games, he was not very good, and the Colts were abysmal, going 2-14, which led head coach Mike McCormack out the door. And in 1982, during the strike-shortened season, even though Hatchett started every game, the Colts went winless, going 0-8-1 under new head coach Frank Kush. To make matters worse, as bad as things got with the Colts under McCormack, it never seemed like Hatchett had any problems with his head coach. In fact, when he was a rookie in 1980, he stood up there and defended his coaching staff, refusing to take any bait that reporters threw his way. When Frank Kush got there, however, a switch flipped, and everything changed. It started out when Hatchett left the Colts during training camp in 1982 to attend the birth of his daughter, which is obviously good, and obviously is something that you should miss work for. The only problem is that he didn't tell anyone, which left Kush incredibly frustrated. As Kush said, "If a player has a family problem like that, I would have excused him." But he didn't say a word to anyone. He just vacated the premises. He still hasn't said a word to me about it, and it will cost him. You can be sure of that. Kush then added on Hatchett's antics, he didn't say anything or leave a message. That's the foolish thing about it. He'll be fined. That's standard procedure. Another member of Kush's coaching staff said on Hatchett, "I don't know where his mind's been ever since camp started, but it clearly hasn't been here. His judgment out there has been consistently poor, and that's usually an indication that the concentration isn't there." And on top of that, Hatchett hated Kush and his situation so much that he demanded a trade to general manager Ernie Accorsi. Oh, and did I mention that he got into a fight in the middle of a team huddle with wide receiver Randy Burke? Twice? He fought Burke multiple times in one practice session. Things were getting ugly in 1982. But in 1983, oh man, were they about to get even uglier. The good news for Hatchett at the start of 1983 was that he was actually having a pretty good start to the season. Through the first 5 games, the Colts were looking like a legitimate team, as they were 3-2 and were tied for the lead in the AFC East. And aside from the fact that the team was playing well, Hatchett as an individual was playing well. He had 3 consecutive games with an interception, recording 1 against Denver, 1 against Chicago, and 1 against Cincinnati. Hatchett only had 3 interceptions in his entire NFL career through his first 3 seasons. Now, he had 3 straight games with a pick. After an incredibly shaky and definitely tumultuous start to his career, things were finally looking up. The bad news was that during the Cincinnati game, he got benched. After Chris Collinsworth burned him all game long, including once on a 63-yard pass in the first quarter, Kush decided to make the switch and pull Hatchett for undrafted rookie Kendall Williams. Coincidentally, Williams went to Arizona State, where Kush was a head coach before this. Now at first, Hatchett had no problem with this benching. He was happy that his team won the game, and he believed that benching him was the right thing to do considering how he'd be struggling. As Hatchett said, "I looked back at the quarterback too long. It was totally a mistake on my part. It shook me up, and I was then a little tentative. I didn't have a good game, so benching me was the best thing to do. We have good backups, and that's what they're there for. Kendall did a great job." That is an incredibly mature response, and Hatchett handled that perfectly. However, when he made those comments, he was under the assumption that this benching was just for this game, and that he would be back in the lineup the following week against the New England Patriots. Why wouldn't he be? Outside of the Bengals game, he was playing pretty well, and was near the top of the NFL in interceptions. One bad game shouldn't undo an entire season's worth of solid work. However, Kush didn't see it like that. He thought that Hatchett was starting to decline, and said that he was becoming apprehensive about getting beat in coverage. And when Kush announced that Kendall Williams was going to start over Hatchett in Sunday's Week 6 game against the New England Patriots, yeah, Hatchett did not take that well at all. What was already a frustrating situation with Frank Kush became a heck of a lot more frustrating. It was so frustrating, in fact, that Hatchett just flat out left the team. Hatchett missed the Patriots game, refusing to play a backup role, and he just went AWOL. He walked out and decided to stay home. By this point, Hatchett was so fed up with Kush and the team that he demanded a trade and vowed to never play for the Colts again. As he said on his walkout, "What other way is there for me to let people know that I'm serious? This is the 3rd time I've asked to be traded. I want out, and when you want out of something badly enough, you try anything." Between the benching and the change in defense, where he said that he was frustrated that Kush wanted the team to play a zone defense instead of man-to-man, and said that the Colts don't need him if they want to play a zone, he was done to the point where he said on his next steps in Baltimore, "I'm only thinking of getting out of here." Things got so ugly that, in his effort to go full scorched earth, his agent said he doesn't like to take the rap for a poor pass rush. How come people aren't asking why they have a 1st and 2nd round draft choice on their defensive line, and they still don't have a pass rusher? Calling out your teammates. Bold strategy. However, Hatchett did not get his wish, and he was still a member of the Colts. He ended his walkout after 5 days, which went about as well as you'd expect. Kush suspended him the maximum number of games allowed under the collective bargaining agreement for conduct detrimental to the team, which in this case was 4 games. And Hatchett was so frustrated about this suspension that he said about the possibility of walking out again, "There are no guarantees." That's right, there are no guarantees. I might do it again. After that, it was the entire organization against Hatchett, with owner Bob Irsay chiming in on the matter, saying that not only did he support Kush in his decision to suspend Hatchett, but that we don't need people like that here. It was very clear that Hatchett's days in Baltimore were numbered. It was also very clear that the Colts' days in Baltimore were numbered, but that's neither here nor there. Anyways, even though Hatchett returned to the Colts and even recorded a game-winning interception late in the 4th quarter of a 22-21 victory against the Philadelphia Eagles, the tensions between the two sides were still ugly with a capital U. Things got even worse when, prior to a Week 12 game on the road against the Miami Dolphins, which Baltimore wound up losing 37-0, Kush decided to keep Hatchett home, feeling that his attitude was hurting the team. As Kush said on why he didn't make the flight, "I thought it would be in the best interest of the club if he did not make the trip. As for whether he'll play for the Colts again, time will tell." And a few days later, Hatchett had some harsh words for Kush and his staff, saying, "You guys think Kush should be Coach of the Year, huh? Well, I'm still waiting for him to do some coaching. He's the biggest detriment to his own team, and he doesn't even know it." And after what felt like the 1000th incident between the two men, finally, the Colts had enough, hit their breaking point, and were ready to cut their losses. Except when Kush decided to cut his losses and let Hatchett go, he did it in about as violent of a manner as you can possibly do it. At roughly 8:15 a.m. on November 23, 1983, Hatchett was called into Kush's office and was told that he was going to be released. When Hatchett was told this news, do you think that he thanked the Colts for their time and talked about how it was unfortunate that things couldn't work out? Or do you think he took it in the worst way possible that made him seem like a crazy person? If you chose the former, what video have you been watching this whole time? Hatchett said the Colts were fools for cutting him, and that's where we get a bunch of different variations of the story. One version said that after Hatchett got cut, he went into the coach's bathroom and Kush told him to leave and get out. Hatchett responded by saying, "I'm not going anywhere. I'm not leaving until I get satisfaction." That's when Kush called Hatchett a punk, walked up to him, and slapped him or punched him with a closed fist. Keep in mind that this wasn't exactly out of character for Kush. He got fired at Arizona State for hitting his punter, Kevin Rutledge. I don't know what it is with successful college coaches who fail in the NFL, thinking that they can hit special teams players. From there, according to Hatchett, he ran into Ernie Accorsi's office with a swollen jaw and all, and yelled at Kush, "Why don't you hit me now like you hit me in your office?" After that, somehow, Hatchett still hadn't left the building. When Kush told Hatchett that he'd throw him out, Hatchett said, "I'd like to see you try." Kush then threatened to sue, and Hatchett said, "What are you going to sue me for? You hit me. I should be suing you." Hatchett didn't want to go public with this at first, saying that he didn't want to be known as the guy that Kush hit, and that he wanted to be known for his football abilities. But after Kush made some comments that made Hatchett seem like a crazy person, where in those accounts of the story, Hatchett was just running down the hallways begging people to hit him, Hatchett wanted the truth to come out. There were two completely different versions of the story. However, both versions ended the same way. Not only was Hatchett cut from the Colts, but Kush slapped him. And as Hatchett described the slap, he moved toward me and I grabbed his arms, but I didn't have his arms tight enough, and he came over the top and caught me on the jaw. It stunned me. I wasn't expecting it. I think it goes without saying that when you're a head coach, no matter how bad things get, you can't exactly strike someone across the face. Good luck getting anyone to play for you, especially when you have a past history, and especially when you already have a reputation for doing things like this, when you hit players that you disagree with and that are outspoken against you. And I think it's fair to say that both sides probably could have handled this situation a whole lot better, and could have handled all 2 years of this relationship better. It definitely had its cracks along the way. And even though nothing came of this from a litigation standpoint, I don't think it's too surprising to say that neither side won in the end. Hatchett was picked up by the Houston Oilers off of waivers, but he did nothing there, playing one game, and he never played another snap in the NFL after the 1983 season. As for Frank Kush, he was out of the NFL before the 1984 season ended, and was absolutely terrible with the Colts, never making the playoffs. If you want to see how bad he was as a head coach, I did an episode of Dumb Decisions about his laughably bad clock management skills in a 1984 game against the St. Louis Cardinals. You can learn more about that by clicking the card in the upper right corner. So what's the moral of the story here? Don't hit people. Just don't hit people. It's not a hard or complex moral. Inciting violence is usually not the answer in a situation like this, especially when you have security guards whose job it is to de-escalate the situation, and especially when it comes to cutting a player that you literally never have to see again after this if you don't want to. And I'm guessing you don't. After the 1983 season, a lot of Colts fans were blinded by the team's move from Baltimore to Indianapolis. But during the 1983 season, one Colts player was blinded by his coach's decision to just slap him across the face. And the Oscar for most dysfunctional coach-player relationship goes to, well, I think you know. Get your official Jaguar Gator 9 merchandise by going to jg9shop.com, and be sure to like this video, ring the notification bell, and subscribe down below if you haven't already, as it helps the channel out a lot. And be sure to check out Twitch every Wednesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern for your chance to play NFL trivia and win cash prizes. Link in the description below. If you want to see videos like this condensed down to 60 seconds, then follow me on TikTok at JaguarGator9. To see college football videos, subscribe to JaguarGator8. To see highlight videos of players throughout the history of the NFL, subscribe to JG9 Highlights. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping out the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. So you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.